our next topic is synapses. Synapses is a term we use for both nerves and muscles muscles with nerves. Synaptic transmission is how do I send signals across that gap between either a nerve to a nerve, a neuron to a neuron, or a nerve to a muscle. So the synapse, junction between adjacent neurons in this unit. In the case of muscular unit, we talked about the fact that motor neurons can go and attach themselves. They don't quite directly attach, they leave a little gap between themselves and the neuron and the muscle, so they're going to send signals across them. Same concept occurs here. So there's a presynaptic neuron that goes before the synapse and a postsynaptic neuron. Obviously, this one's going to send the signal to the postsynaptic one, so you're going to go from one to the other. There's a synaptic end bulb, which is basically the end of the presynaptic neuron. It's going to basically send the signal from one to the other. If you're sending signals from one to the other, that means you have the ability to interrupt them. So a lot of our medications that people take, they're designed to stop things like pain and other situations like that, or to numb things, are going to disrupt this signal. That's what they're there for. Synaptic vesicles are located inside the synaptic end bulb, but their job is to contain neurotransmitters, allowing you to send one from to the other one. Now in the case of nerves to muscles, we only use acetylcholine. That's not the only one. There's multiple different neurotransmitters within the nervous system that do different tasks. So those neurotransmitters play a huge role in this. Synaptic cleft is the gap that goes between where the end of the presynaptic neuron is and the start of the postsynaptic neuron, the jumping point. So these neurotransmitters are going to cross that gap and they're going to activate receptors. Now since there are more than one type, that means there has to be multiple receptors. So some neurotransmitters will not work for some different types of neurons because they don't have the right receptors. So that can play a role. We can simulate that with drugs in order to block or to activate them utilizing different types of shapes. So in this case here, I see a presynaptic neuron coming in attaching to a postsynaptic neuron, allowing it to send signals and then sending the signal forward. So you may have multiple ones doing this. In this case, there's two different presynaptic neurons coming to this one postsynaptic neuron, with the cleft up here allowing you to send the neurotransmitters across it. This is a better view of this. You can see where the synaptic vesicles here containing the neurotransmitters are going to cross the gap here and activate these little receptors down here. Different kind of actions that can occur. One of those are excitatory actions, as the name implies. It makes them do something. Inhibitory actions do the exact opposite. They stop things from happening. So you may have some drugs that their job is to stop pain signals. Some are there to speed it up or cause it to go faster. So those kind of things occur naturally, and then we've utilized drugs and different chemicals to basically simulate these two actions. So the neurotransmitters, there are over 50 known neurotransmitters. We keep finding new ones all the time because sometimes certain chemicals found in one part of the body aren't a neurotransmitter, but you find them inside the nervous system, they become a neurotransmitter. So because of that, it becomes kind of complicated to try to figure out how they work all the time in different parts of the body. Acetylcholine we've already talked about before. It's obviously most commonly known because it's the neurotransmitter that causes muscles to work. It is an excitatory action in the case of muscles. Monoamines, as their name implies, they're a single amine. Amines are a type of functional subgroup. This includes things like epinephrine, norepinephrine, dopamine, serotonin. All play huge roles in how our body functions. Obviously things like epinephrine and norepinephrine are better well known by their common hormone names of things like adrenaline. People get EpiPens for allergies because they have to have that in order to overcome that. Dopamine and serotonin play a role. Serotonin plays a role in mood. A lot of mood disorders play an issue with serotonin levels. Some amino acids and their derivatives also function this way. That's why I talk about amino acids in some part of the body are just going to be used to make proteins. But in the case of the neurotransmitters, they may become that kind of role within the nervous system. So things like glycine, glutamic acid, aspartic acid, and gamma-aminobutyric acid, otherwise known as GABA. Those particular ones are used to make proteins in most of the body, except in the nervous system they can also be used to be a neurotransmitter. Neuropeptides, these are proteins that play a role in how our functioning works, and that's the kind of chemical category they belong to. Includes things like endorphins, enkephalins. You've heard of endorphins because they play a role in pleasure sensations, things like that, that are able to give us rewards for doing things that our body likes us to do. Acetylcholine and norepinephrine are both excitatory. They basically speed up actions. Whereas GABA, dopamine, and glycine are all inhibitory. Dopamine in the body basically acts as a natural painkiller. It sort of numbs things down. So it shows you a few examples of some of these concepts, in general, the things that they do. The chemicals that affect the way our transmissions work fall in different categories. Stimulants, as their name implies, they stimulate the nervous system, make it speed up. Caffeine is one of the most well-known ones. It actually affects the system, makes everything speed up, go faster. Cocaine has multiple effects, but one of its most primary one is a stimulant to speed things up. Nicotine also is a stimulant. Amphetamines in general, all types of amphetamines fall in this category of stimulants. Depressants, their job is to slow the nervous system down. That includes things like anesthetics. Anesthetics include things like chloroform, ether, toluene, things that are used to basically knock you out to an extent. Anti-anxiety drugs like sleeping pills, tranquilizers, their job is to do what their name implies, sort of make it just not function and work anymore, slow everything down to the point it doesn't want to receive the information as much as it should. Alcohol acts as a depressant. Barbiturates and opiates, heroin and morphine. That's why they're used as painkillers a lot of times, because they basically slow everything down. Antidepressants as a general group of drugs include things like dibenzapines. That's a common chemical name for things like Prozac and things that fall in those categories of dibenzapines. They affect the level of norepinephrine, so they're going to have that sort of inhibitory effect in the way that they work. Psychedelic drugs have their own category. They affect serotonin, which is one of the reasons why a lot of people have issues with them, like hallucinations and things like that, because it's going to affect the way serotonin works in our brain. So hallucinations are a common side effect. That includes things like LSD, lysergic acid diethylamide, which was man-made but created originally from a fungus that was called ergot. Mescaline, which comes from a cactus. Psilocybin, which comes from funguses, like people would take like certain types of mushrooms that create this. And there's also some animals that produce things like psilocybin very similar to it, like certain types of toads and other animals that use it as a defense mechanism. Analgesics, funny name, what it actually is relieves pain. So things like Tylenol, aspirin. So aspirin, which is salicylic acid. Acetaminophen, which is Tylenol, that's its common brand name. Aspirin and salicylic acid, which comes from the willow tree or the salus tree. So therefore we get the name salicylic acid. Ibuprofen, both common name and its chemical name is used that way. This one actually just thins the blood. These two actually affect the way the nerves work, but it does play a role with the nerves as well, just not as much as the other two, which is why it's usually recommended for things like heart problems. Cannabis is its own category because it doesn't really fall into those other categories. It has its own thing. We keep trying to discover new things about it and all the things that it can do and affect the way the nerves transmit and the way the nerves work.